Okay, we are going to start. Just waiting a few more seconds that people little by little are joining this event. But in the meantime, I'll make some brief introduction. So first of all, welcome to you all from the Privacy Rules Alliance. My name is Alessandro Di Mattia. I am the director of the Alliance, and I'm very pleased to see you all today here with us in order to discuss a very relevant topic of the moment, which is the one of how to build a unified compliance strategy dealing with the many frameworks that we are having now in the EU, such as NIS2, DORA, CRA, and GDPR. The focus of the sessions that we will have today is mainly starting from the NIS2 framework, which we will use as a starting point also to analyze how to deal with the other ones. As you probably all know, one of the key elements of the NIS2 is that it requires two different types of expertise whenever you want to deal with it in order to comply with it, which are cybersecurity experts from the one side and legal experts on the other. Indeed, we are still speaking about a framework that needs to be complied under the legal perspective as well. It is also true that NIS2 has an additional layer of complexity, which is the fact that is a directive and there's a different, let's say, application country by country within the EU. And if this is not enough, there is a third level of complexity, which is the fact that there are other frameworks with which it sometimes looks like overlapping or not. So there is, a pretty lot of materials to work on under the EU, but also international perspective. In order to discuss and try to understand how to deal with these very complex situation that we are speaking about, I have invited 3 different privacy rules experts today with me that I'm very pleased to introduce you to. The first one is Heike Klaus, founder at CISS, and Heike is an information risk and governance advisor at the company and partner of the Privacy Rules Alliance. So she comes from more the security field than the legal one. And then I'm pleased to introduce you to the legal experts that are from the one side, Endre Varidi from VGT Partners in Hungary, and Bernd Fieden from Timelex, Belgian law firm of the Privacy Rules Alliance. So first of all, I would like to thank the 3 speakers for being with us today. And I would also like to thank you all for being with us, inviting you to make questions to our team through the various channels, depending on if you are on YouTube or LinkedIn, on other channels, through the space and the boxes that are made for that. So please feel free to start already making questions. Without further delay, we know that the time is pretty short. So I would like to immediately jump in with our experts. First of all, Heike, Bernd, Endre, thanks a lot for being with us. My first question to the 3 of you goes into, implementation of NIS2. So my first question goes to Endre under the legal perspective, and then I'll move to Heike. Endre, what should company be looking at when they implement NIS2, in particular in a multinational scenario in the EU?
Thank you, Alessandro. Well, I think first of all, companies should look at the broad coverage and the complexity of NIS2. So as a starting point, we must see that NIS2 has a very broad coverage. It applies nearly to 20 sectors, covering thousands of entities, mainly in each jurisdiction. And not to forget that suppliers are also affected as businesses have to deal with their supply chain. So this makes even a much bigger NIS2 impact. And even in this preliminary exercise, we can see that NIS2 applicability assessment is not so easy as it seems at the first sight. First of all, we have to analyze sector-specific definition of various activities. For example, in case of chemical manufacturing, it is a question what chemical material means. Does it cover only chemical substances or also chemical articles? So we have to take a deep dive into sector-specific legislation. Also, it is a challenge that businesses many times make mistakes in this applicability exercise. For example, there is a myth that if you reduce the total number of workforce below the threshold, you can immediately escape from NIS2. Unfortunately, this is not the case. And there is also a misconception that the individual company financial threshold matters and not the group company threshold, whilst in reality it is vice versa. We should consider the group company financial threshold. So here we can make big mistakes. So to sum up, it is very important to see that applicability assessment is beyond just checking activity list. And once the applicability assessment is done, things are getting excited for those who like challenges. As a starting point, I would say that businesses have to map their information systems and all the related assets of these systems like hardware, software, database. This mapping is very important because it defines the scope of risk assessment. And after that, the risk assessment is even more, maybe more important because only based on risk assessment, businesses can decide which security controls should be implemented, which are those controls which are proportionate to the cyber security risk. And once this mapping and risk assessment is done, companies can move forward with gap analysis and budget planning and allocation of tasks for the whole NIS2 implementation. But all these comes only as next steps after mapping and risk assessment is done after establishing this preliminary compliance foundation.
Perfect, Ender. Thanks a lot for introducing us a bit on what companies should be looking when implementing NIS2 in a multi-jurisdictional scenario, let's say. Heike, with a cut more on the security side, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, from my point of view, here I add also to Andrew's point that NIS2 significantly expands both to the scope and the complexity of compliance. So I think this is really the challenge we are having. And really the first priority should be to determine the company's classification under that directive. And I think in the afternoon, you are going to have much more details on this topic as well. But for me, it also starts with the point that very often organizations already have operating cybersecurity framework in place. And for those which have already something in place, which is most probably based on on ISO 27001 or the NIST cybersecurity control framework, it will be much easier and less effort to deal with these challenges. However, for those without such a structured framework, I strongly recommend to implement one. So because this is not only facilitates compliance, but also ensures a sustainable and resilient cybersecurity posture integrating security best practices into the company's long-term strategy. So saying that companies which are having already something, they have it much easier to take on this challenge, and companies which do not have a framework, they need to do a little more. And I think we are going into the details a little later.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot for this, Heike. I think it's a very good point. Also, because as we were saying at the beginning, there are other frameworks, and starting with a common base normally relates to being already, knowing already, those other standards that can help a lot. Ben, do you have any additional comment in this regard?
Well, yeah, if I may add one point. I fully agree with what Andre and Heike have already said, but we see in practice that many organizations see NIS2 compliance only as a technical challenge, but actually is also a legal challenge. For instance, if you do not thoroughly analyze beforehand whether and how NIS will apply to your organization, you may end up with duplication of effort afterwards, and of course that would be wasted effort. So ultimately, NIS2 is a directive. It's transposed in national laws, and so it's natural to involve lawyers in its interpretation as well.
Of course, and that's open up to one of the key points also during the discussion we were making in the preparatory phases for this webinar, but in general, an issue that is often faced under the legal perspective, which is the one of legal challenges. One of the key elements in NIS2 is dealing with a supply chain, and whenever we speak about supply chain, we speak about many contracts that are involved and several clauses that are involved as well. So how, based on your experience, and I'll keep you discussing with you on this, Bernd, how should companies deal with all those different contracts and different clauses in practice?
Yes, so the supply chain security is indeed one of the most important, I would say, obligations of NIS2. And this is also immediately the reason why NIS2 is not only important for organizations that are themselves covered by NIS2, because you may also have to deal with NIS2 requirements if your customers, for example, fall under the scope of NIS2. So suppose your customers are mainly companies in the energy sector, then NIS2 will also become important for your organization, even if you are too small yourself to be covered by NIS2, or even if you do not provide services that fall under the scope of NIS2.
Yep, that's clear, and and this gives us an overview on the issue related to the supply chain. Let's move on the other topic I mentioned while making the question to you, which is the one of the contractual aspect. So what should company consider under the contractual perspective when dealing with these frameworks?
Well, first of all, the contractual aspect, now you mentioned, is often forgotten in practice because NIS2 projects, what we see, are often led by IT departments or IT service providers, and they, of course, they make sure that the technical measures are in place, but they typically do not look at the contracts. So the cooperation between technical and legal people, I think, is very important. But to come back to your question, Alessandro, I would like to focus on the contracts in the event of a cyber incident. Because generally speaking, contracts are read twice. Once when they are signed, and a second time when something goes wrong. So this is the case, for example, when a service provider is responsible for damage. Think of a ransomware attack that is possible because your IT service provider has not taken the necessary security measures. Suppose that ransomware shuts down your production, your organization's production. Then who is responsible? Is it the IT service provider that perhaps did not inform you sufficiently about security leaks? Or are you, as a customer, responsible for asking the right questions? And that's a classic discussion in IT contracts.
I see. I see the point, and the issue of having the contracts read not too often or not enough. And if Ike and Andre allows me, I'd like to delve a bit more into this point that Bernd is opening. You were speaking about the context of a cyber incident, which is exactly what NIS2, for example, wants to avoid or to deal. Company be prepared dealing with. So which are the contractual provisions you would be looking at in case of a cyber incident, for example?
Well, think in such a case you would first of all look at the services described in the contract. What did the service provider promise you to deliver? And also, what are the security guarantees that were offered? But also termination. After all, it is of course possible that you no longer have any confidence in that service provider as a result of a cyber incident. Then does the contract provide the possibility of early termination simply because a cyber incident has occurred? Well, these are all questions that will arise at that moment and for which your contract will be important. And of course, you can anticipate these questions when drawing up the contract or when amending the contract. And I think, in my opinion, NIS2 is a very good reason or opportunity to take another look at the existing contracts, and maybe you will have to add some kind of addendum, for instance.
That's very interesting, Bernd, because basically what you're saying is that NIS2 and this type of framework provides a series of requirements that are, cybersecurity requirements, which are clearly stated direct requirements. And then there is a bunch of, let's say, indirect requirements or effects that connect to these that are often probably legal type of requirements. So in this regard, what should what agreements should contain whenever dealing with suppliers, of course, in terms, for example, of security clauses to protect themselves?
Well, maybe before we talk about security clauses, I think we should first take a step back. Of course, the first important step, even before you talk about a contract, is the choice to work with a specific service provider. So I think it's best to develop processes for this and to draw up a clear supplier selection process that also takes security criteria into account. I will give you an example. Do you prefer a supplier that is ISO 27001 certified over another, maybe cheaper service provider that does not have such a certification? And will you take into account any national cybersecurity certifications? In Belgium, for example, we have the Cyber Fundamentals framework that has already been adopted by another member state and is still being considered by other member states as well. But to go back to your to the supplier selection process, as part of such a process, you may end up with a preferred service provider with whom you will start negotiations. You can then determine which technical and organizational security measures the provider will have to comply with. And we are all familiar with those kind of TOMs, we would say, as part of data processing agreements under GDPR. But now it is more about, it's about more than personal data. So the security measures will also have to be applied more broadly within the organization, and other risks and cyber threats will have to be taken into account. And also something else you should consider: what possibilities does a contract offer to tighten the security measures in the future? Because as you know, cyber threats, they evolve by definition. So you may need to be able to respond to new cyber threats, and your service provider may need to cooperate in implementing such additional security measures. So the question is, will the service provider be contractually obliged to cooperate? And are there any agreements about costs, for instance? So these are all questions to consider, I think, in terms of security clause.
Thanks a lot. And as you did a step back, I think it might be good to make another step back, but this time from our side and shifting probably to Heike, because I understand that when you speak about security clauses and cybersecurity requirements that should be respected, we are coming back to probably the requirements of the framework. So in this case, the NIS2 framework. So maybe it's good to to refresh a bit our mind on which are those requirements. So maybe Eike, you can help us in which are in your view the key requirements that we should never forget when dealing with those framework NIS2, of course, in particular in this case.
I think first of all, cybersecurity has to be addressed on board level and executive level, because at the end, as we have heard from Bernd, certain things need to be implemented. There need some negotiations. There's always a cost sign behind, meaning if this is not discussed on the top level, it does not have the attention and also not has the power to be implemented for the future. From my point of view, the board and executive level need to be aware of that, need to be part of this cybersecurity challenges. They need to be incorporated in continuous monitoring, reporting, and training. So they need to understand what happens, because by investing a lot of money, they don't have direct the revenue of that, because until nothing happens, for what do I need to spend the money, and here we need to we have somehow a glass ball we look into and say, okay, we need to do something. We cannot say, okay, you will have this revenue. This is not cybersecurity. And here I think there is a lot of education also required upwards to the management level, board level, executive level, about the understanding, and that they understand that we cannot negotiate always the amount down. We need to spend the money for the right thing. I think this is the most important thing, this buy-in from the executive level. Secondly, if we are coming from a technical point of view, for sure, core cybersecurity and data security measures need to be applied on a risk-based level. For example, implementing zero trust security principles, conducting regular penetration testing and security audits, then enforcing multi-factor authentication and implementing secure access controls, and ensuring compliance with data protection laws like GDPR or the Swiss data law in Switzerland. So this is also something, big initiatives which need happen, which are costly, but need to be done. Then as a third important point, there is the incident detection and reporting management. Here it's really essential to establish an incident response plan, which clearly has clear escalation procedures and meeting the NIS2 reporting timelines, which are, for example, 24 hours initial notification need to happen if something occurs, or the 72 hours detailed report, which need to follow after such an event. And then also the full investigation report, which has to be done within 1 month. So also here, it is really essential to assign clear responsibilities. And this goes hand in hand with implementing cybersecurity training and awareness programs. So if I'm responsible for something, I need to understand what do I need to do, for what do I need to do. And here the training and awareness aspect is quite crucial. Then the second last one I would like to mention here is the business continuity and crisis management. Also here it is important to have a very good business continuity procedure in place, and to implement and test, and this is I'm saying, and test this disaster recovery plans, followed by strong backup strategic and offline backups. Very often companies fail in these areas because they say, okay, I am having a disaster recovery plan, but have you ever tested that? The environment have changed, and you have something which is not working. And this is huge exercise as well, but also worth to do it. And the last one I would also like to mention here, and this goes in what Bernd has said, is the third party and supplier security management. From beginning, it has to be clear that the security requirements need to be added to the contracts. Later on, it starts blaming, it starts with everything, but legal must be involved, IT security must be involved, cybersecurity must be involved in such contracts to have really the right controls mentioned there. And also what is important there, beside this supplier evaluation process, is if you have suppliers already contracted to perform regularly security assessments once a year based on the contract, so to be sure that everything is working fine as well, doing sample testing, etc. This is already helping to say, okay, I have a good feeling that everything is under control also with the suppliers. So these are the most important points from my side to look at.
Thank you very much for sharing, Ike. You touched some very essential points, and we know that sometimes financially speaking might look like a burden, but on the other side, it's also true that risking the data within your company might become a much higher type of damage. And of course, the point of and this is something that was shared by Bernd, but this is also our experience to really involve as soon as you can the different experts that you need in order to comply with those framework is essential to avoid duplication of work. As you were saying, it's really something I'd like to stress, because it's true that it's important, and it can be really convenient for the company to approach it in the right way. In this regard, I'd like to make sure that we are not missing any of the requirements. So maybe, Andre, on the legal side, is there anything else that you would like to add from your perspective?
I think Heike made a perfect job, because she touched upon the cybersecurity aspects, but also some very important legal aspects. So actually, she makes my job easier. I fully agree with her approach. Management liability is very important, because managers can bear direct liability. Is a very hot topic. I consider very important the risk-based approach, as I said, and Heike also mentioned, for example, in Hungary, depending on the security risk level, it could vary how many security controls your business need to implement. At security risk level 1, businesses have to implement around 160 measures. In case of security risk level 3, the number of controls could go even to almost 400 measures. Heike also touched upon the security measures. So what I would just add is the general compliance perspective, which is, I think, very important to understand. Namely, it is very important to understand also from compliance perspective that this is not just a ticking type of exercise about having the appropriate controls. It is much more than that, because you have to build up a structured and a very robust governance framework to address and manage cybersecurity threats on continuous basis. And this framework includes organizational structure, roles, responsibilities, testing for audit readiness, role-based training, and last but not least, documentation policies, so that you can also reflect those processes on document level and regulate those processes. So you really need a holistic approach. But beyond this general compliance approach I just described, and Heike's technical description of security measures, there are some additional legal obligations. For example, for the information security officer, there are very similar rules like the GDPR data protection officer, the independence and allocating necessary resources for information security officer is very important, and I also agree that it is very important to regulate the supply chain. So we have to reflect the NIS2 requirements in the supplier contracts, because businesses can bear direct liability for suppliers' cybersecurity processes.
Thank you, Andre, and you touched upon several relevant points. Of course, there is an higher degree of liabilities for the company whenever we deal with those frameworks, which is something that should be mentioned. That needs to held the companies accountable, of course, for complying with the framework. And thanks to you and Ike to giving us also a bit the perspective of the security requirements, and also what should be into the security clauses, which brings me back to what we were saying with Bernd, because I understand that with the security clauses, we make sure that everyone is respecting the requirements of the framework. Probably also the requirements related to data protection, so more GDPR oriented, but there are some others elements that probably we should keep in mind, and two of those are confidentiality and liability, that are additional clauses that normally we see under the legal perspective. So I would like to bring back Bernd in this case, as we were speaking about the clauses. So how can Bernd, a cyber incident lead to a breach of confidentiality? And I make direct question on this, and who is normally liable, how to protect ourselves, let's say, in these cases.
Well, it's true that a cyber incident could compromise the confidentiality of data in several ways. Hackers might gain unauthorized access to sensitive information, or ransomware could encrypt the data, which makes it inaccessible, and so on. So this could all be a violation of the contractual confidentiality obligation. And if we assume that this would indeed be a breach of the contractual confidentiality clause, then the most pressing question that arises is the following: should the service provider pay damages, and how will you calculate those damages? What damage do you include in the calculation? And in this case, I usually recommend including at least a fixed amount of compensation in the agreement, just to avoid discussions about the calculation of the compensation, like direct damages, indirect damages, and so on, because this could also be different among jurisdictions and so on.
I see. And who is typically the subject responsible for damages whenever there is a cyber incident in your experience?
That's a good question, but I think it really depends on the specifics of the contract, but also of the cyber incident itself. So generally, if a service provider is found to be negligent in their security practices, they may be held liable for damages in most jurisdictions, even if this was not really part of the contract. But liability, it can be complex, so I would still recommend to have a clear contractual agreement in place about the liability, and perhaps liability caps, who knows, in case of a cyber incident.
Thank you very much, Bernd. That's now clear, let's say. And I think that what is emerging from the scenario that we are giving to our audience in this moment, one of the key elements that I was also mentioning in the introduction is that there is, of course, a need of a strong coordination between the legal and the cybersecurity experts in cases like these. And I would like to receive a bit of experience sharing by our experts here in the room, virtual room, unfortunately, in relation to this specific point. So maybe I can readdress the questions now to Heike. And Heike, my question for you would be why it is this combination between legal and cybersecurity support a challenge, and how do you, or how it can be addressed in your opinion?
Yeah. So first of all, Alessandro, what I really like about this event is that we come together. So that's the first thing, which is the most important part, is collaboration. And I think one point is that very often the IT security team, cybersecurity, and legal are speaking different languages, which is not bad, you know. Nevertheless, if they're not talking to each other and try to get a common understanding on certain topics, it makes it very difficult. So from that point of view, what I recommend, and I also did that in the past, is that we overcome this silo thinking to say, okay, even if it takes at the beginning a little longer to sit together, to discuss certain things, to discuss what does certain controls mean to be implemented from a legal perspective, as well as from an IT security perspective or cybersecurity perspective. Let's sit together and define it together. And then over the time, we are gaining a common understanding and a better understanding of each other's specific area. And here we have the big opportunity working together, having meetings together to say, okay, what is important? How is the interpretation of that? What would it mean from a legal perspective to the IT security perspective? How can we do that in a contractual base in a way that it fits? And that's the most challenging thing, but it's also a good thing if we are working together. So for me, the game changer in this area is really sitting together, discussing the pieces, defining the relevant things. For example, also defining what does the confidentiality in this specific control means, you know. Also to understand what is, for example, the cost implication of that. And I think these are the topics we need to talk about together, not in isolation. And that's my message, to say work together, collaborate, and have really meetings set up where you are looking at the things together in order to avoid double work, unalignment, and confusion.
Of course. Thanks a lot. And Andrea, from your perspective, we switch to the legal perspective.
Well, I think, first of all, it is very important to emphasize that collaboration between legal and cyber security experts is not optional. It is a must, as clients expect holistic and integrated service package, which covers both the regulatory aspects and the cyber security measures. And as Heike rightly noted, indeed, it is a challenge that legal experts and cyber security experts often do not speak the same language, because they have different focus points. But if we try to understand each other, there is also a possibility for improvement. And I think to bridge the gap, it is very important to align at the kickoff part of the project by defining the roles, responsibilities, allocation of tasks to ensure a coordinated and efficient workflow already from the outset. And I think what is good that beyond this challenge, digitalization can bring here a unique opportunity for legal and cyber security experts to work together on automatized compliance tools, which could make easier and much more effective NIS2 compliance projects.
Thank you, Andrew. In these regards, of course, there are more and more tools that can implement and support companies in complying. Of course, they need to be managed through experts that supports you in doing it in the right way, meaning that the usage alone is not sufficient in many cases, but flanked with experts can be really really effective. So thanks a lot for that. I would like to ask a final question, and then we move to the the super final question, which is the key takeaways. But before doing that, in your view, Andre and Eike, what are the key steps for a company that needs to be implemented for being NIS2 compliant effectively?
Shall I start? So for me, I would say, okay, another directive is coming, so it's nothing new. So we have observed that over the few years, and it will most probably not be the last one. So the first thing is I would start with a gap analysis to identify the areas where the current cybersecurity program falls short of the NIS requirements. So the NIS2 requirements. So that would be the first thing, because very often the companies already have a lot of stuff, and now we need to see, okay, what do we add, or where do we need to make a change? The second one is really to say, okay, that the board accountability is established, so that we have the budget for that we have cybersecurity at the board level discussed and supported by. And then the third one is for sure to implement the key measures which are not yet there or which need to be improved, especially the incident response playbooks. I think this is something which is really key to look at, and the business continuity. And then as the last point, again, what Bernd is also saying is looking at the third-party risk management and the contractual situation we have to improve, or we have to really strengthen. So from my point of view, with these things, you can lay the foundation for sustainable and successful NIS2 implementation. So it's nothing new, but we need to do something.
Yeah. And Andre, do you believe we might want to add anything else, at least from your experience?
Yeah, these are all very valid points. I would just add some additional thoughts. I think it is very important to set a good action plan at the kickoff part of the project by focusing on task allocation and timeline, and ensuring that nothing important is overlooked. I would also highlight, in case of multinational companies, to leverage international cybersecurity standards like ISO 27001 or NIS 853, because this could streamline the processes and make the compliance much easier. Also, I think it is important to consider the audit aspects, because on one hand you have to select the right auditor with the right license. And the other hand, when you are working on NIS2 compliance project, you have to align your compliance audits, your compliance efforts to the scope of audit, which could be defined by audit regulation or audit contracts, depending on the jurisdiction. And I emphasize this several times, but I will do it again. I think that really conducting a well carried out security risk assessment is very important to ensure that security controls are neither loose, poor controls, nor excessive, but appropriate controls. I would also touch upon what Heike said. Corporate management responsibility is a very important matter, so it is very important to include the management and document their management for accountability purpose. And last but not least, we cannot overemphasize this. we should not forget about cybersecurity training, as the lack of cybersecurity awareness could completely undermine compliance efforts.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot to you and Heike. I believe that we are learning a lot on the approach, but the key element is always the one of doing things right since the very beginning. So involving the people, make all the assessments, and make sure that you have a clear understanding of what's happening in your company before starting all the other processes. No matter if you have to deal just with NIS2, with one or more countries, or with one or more frameworks, it really starts everything from there. And doing it right since the very beginning might help you not having to lose additional time and money in several activities. We are already over time, so just last round of takeaways from the three of you. I would say Heike first, Andre, Bernd, to conclude, so that we give back the floor to Bernd at the end.
Okay, I think it's very important that we have NIS2 is seen as a strategic approach for the company. We need to balance the legal and cybersecurity and the business needs, so that we really also are objective oriented. We have to leverage a digital ISMS, or if it's not yet there, so that we really have also a sustainable approach for the future, not to start everything again. If we set the right foundation, it can help also for future challenges which are coming. And the last one, which I would like to emphasize, is the seamless collaboration between all the three different areas: legal, security, and the IT teams. I think this is a key point.
Thank you, Heike. Andre?
I absolutely agree with Heike that we should approach this too as a strategy, because, as I said, this compliance exercise is not about ticking boxes, but we should integrate cyber security process into business strategy. And to my mind, in this strategy, the security risk assessment and building up a robust governance framework plays a key role, while security risk assessment ensures implementing appropriate security controls. Building up a robust governance framework ensures businesses to stay compliant on a continuous basis. And ultimately, I think that businesses should align the legal obligations, the cybersecurity resilience, and the operational challenges. So we have to find the right balance between these aspects to create a sustainable, safe, but business-driven security culture.
Perfect, Andre. And last but not least, Bernd, to conclude, the floor is yours.
All right, I want to conclude with 2 points. The first point is an example from Belgium. Just to give you an idea of the scope of NIS2. In Belgium, there is guidance from the authorities saying that if you are a mid-sized company, at least mid-sized or large company, and you have solar panels, you are considered as an energy producer and you fall under the scope of NIS2, just because you have solar panels. So that's my first point. My second point was already mentioned by Heike as well. Language between the departments. If you manage to get IT and legal to understand each other, I think you are already a long way ahead. And that's a positive note for me to end on.
Perfect. I think it's extremely interesting to hear about your case. Thanks a lot for sharing that, because myself, I wouldn't be expecting that by having solar panel you might fall, within the scope of the framework. That was a very interesting session. I would like to thank you all for being with us. Looking forward to the next session in about 10 minutes from now. So stay tuned with us, to all our audience, and we meet in a few minutes again. Ben, Heike, Andre, was a great pleasure. Thanks a lot. Looking forward to our next webinar or Privacy Espresso activity together.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
for the invitation.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And yes, we are live again. So welcome everyone again. Thanks a lot for joining Privacy Rules and this webinar of today. We are at the second session on our webinar on building a unified compliance strategy with NIS2, CRA, DORA, and the GDPR. We had a very intense first session where we have been dealing with how to comply with the DORA regulatory framework, which are the key issues related to that, and how to put together legal cybersecurity experts in order to ensure full compliance. We have now a second session, and I'm pleased to introduce you to the participants of it, which comes from, again, the more cybersecurity world and legal world. First of all, on the security side, I would say Charlotte Riley, Director of Information Security at CSS Ashore. It's a pleasure to have you here, Charlotte. Then Michaela Holikova, associate from the Czech Republic law firm Rowan Legal, assisting the Privacy Rules Alliance also for Slovakia. So she represents two countries in one. And last but not least, Bartosz Sujecki from the law firm from the Netherlands, Van Diep and Van der Cruyff Advocaten, three experts to deal together with us with several matters that should appear in the screen here with me little by little. Here we are. Welcome everyone, and nice for being here with us today. So in order for me to move forward with the topic of today, and in order to make it as practical as possible for you, what we would like to do is to share a starting case scenario that I want to appear right here, hopefully now. In this case scenario, you will see that we have structured or created a company, of course, a not real one, named Eurofintech, which is a leading financial technology company providing ICT services on critical or important function to financial entities across the entire European Union. The company has headquarters in Germany, but also operational branches in France, Italy, and Czechia, and relies on a vast network of third-party cloud providers and IT vendors to support its digital services. So based on this scenario, we will discuss addressing in particular three topics, the first of which is scope and compliance and its complexity. Then we will speak about incident response reporting, and last but not least, third party and supply chain. So without further delay, let me open up the discussion by addressing, first of all, Bartosz, I would say, because I have a question, of course, for you, which is the very common starting question whenever we have to deal with NIS2 in multi-jurisdictional scenarios. So Bartosz, how should companies like the one we are seeing in the screen manage the challenge of aligning with the different national interpretation on NIS2 across the European Union?
Well, Alexandra, first of all, thank you for having me here. Well, I think that the topic that the NIS2 directive is a big challenge for such companies, and it depends of the size of the companies. The problem of the NIS2 is that it is a directive, so it has to be implemented into national law, which makes that certain aspects can differ a little bit and slightly a little bit. So in my view, companies which are seated, like in this case in Germany, and have branches in 3 different European countries, they have to kind of look at the local laws, whether they apply on that, which could be quite challenging because those laws can differ. So in my view, they should coordinate that from just, I would say, the headquarters, and look for either the local councils or even law firms, or to get some kind of advice from firms whether they comply with the NIS2 obligations. But generally speaking, I think it's quite a challenge, especially for mid-sized companies that do not have that those resources, like for instance the companies like Meta or Google that can handle such things internally.
Of course, thanks a lot for this brief overview, Bartosz. And I think that one of the let's say sister framework of NIS2, and is the one that more often is flanked to that, is DORA, which brings me to my next question, and I would like to involve this time Michaela for this. How can there are specific cases and specific complexities, like cloud provider like AWS or Azure. In cases like these, and like the one of the company again that we have in our hypothetical scenario, how should company ensure that they meet the regulatory requirements, for example, without having the direct control over the security measures that are required by those frameworks?
Yeah, thank you, Alessandro. Thank you for having me, and hi everyone on the other side of the screen. Yeah, the DORA actually brings a lot of, let's say, specific topics. Yeah, on one hand, the situation is different a little bit within the NIS2, because as Bartosz said, the NIS2 is still a directive. So the transposition can actually, or it is actually very different, or it's kind of different state from member state. With DORA, we have some kind of luck that this is a regulation. So there is like unified framework that is provided to the financial entities, and that there is also this kind of indirect impact to the, let's say, fintech suppliers, or in DORA language, these are the providers of ICT services. And when I said there is this kind of luck, in DORA, there's special like requirements that are setting there is a requirement, Article 30, that's setting the requirements to the supply chain, or what should be, let's say, included in the contractual arrangements with the suppliers. So this is the first part. I did a little bit like step back. So first is the relationship between the financial entity and our model company, this Eurofintech. And as we are having in mind that Eurofintech is actually providing its services based on some big cloud computing providers, then actually we are kind of like tricky situation, because on one hand, actually these big cloud service providers can be seen as other subcontractors, right, that are providing the service to the financial entity, whatever it is. And then usually the part in the middle, or our model company, the Eurofintech, has the, let's say, obligation to actually have the same contractual clauses, or let's say the requirements also in the contract with this kind of big cloud service providers. This is a tricky part, because usually these kind of entities are not really, or like fintech entities are not really in the position to really negotiate some kind of special requirements. Hey, you big cloud computing provider, we need you to assist us with the pen testing when it will be required from the financial entity. And DORA luckily thought about this situation. So this is why we have some kind of like third category, or different category of ICT service suppliers, which are the critical ICT service suppliers. And these critical ICT service providers will be actually appointed by the European Commission. And there will be also the direct overview, or direct overview of the like regulation officers in the member states. So we are actually kind of expecting a lot of things will be already in compliance, not really just by the kind of pressure that will be developed from the side of Eurofintech companies and financial entities, but also from the state's regulators that will they will kind of like force these kind of big companies to be compliant with DORA clauses.
Makes total sense. And let me add another layer of complexity. That's something we were doing also in the previous session. We've been speaking about one of the issues related to the DORA regulation, but in general, and we started from the legal perspective with Bartosz. So I wanted to shift now more on the security side of it, calling Charlotte for this question, which is the one of the classical one. Let's say pretty broad. So which are the key technical challenges whenever you have to deal with companies that needs to measure themselves across multiple jurisdiction and also across multiple frameworks, because there might be indeed a case where you have to deal with both DORA and NIS2 like this one. And how can you maintain operational efficiency in such a complex framework under your perspective?
Thanks, Alessandro, and hi, everybody. So yeah, this is becoming increasingly complex, I think, for companies to manage. What we have is a difference in across frameworks, across jurisdictions, and now some are more prescriptive than others. GDPR, for example, references appropriate security measures, and you base those upon a risk assessment and implement appropriately. Whereas NIS2 starts to be more prescriptive. For example, it's defining a minimum encryption standard, and it's also focused at the system level. So it's actually saying you need to perform risk assessments on each individual system and then apply the applicable controls based on the directive. And of course, there is nuance then on how the individual countries have put that into law and interpreted that from a control set point of view. So you can have, I think, quite a lot of overlapping controls, but some then that are prescribed, and then some that are at an organizational level, and then a system level. So it's a lot to manage and keep up with. The way we recommend going about this is you can still use, if you're using an ISMS, an information security management system, like for example in the ISO 27001 framework, you can still use this approach, but you need to start then with applicability. I think applicability of entities, so which entities come under which jurisdiction and therefore which framework, and then you need to get into mapping of your systems as well to understand which applicable controls are going to be required. And then, of course, under NIS2, you need to perform risk assessments across those systems and start to do gap analysis on that control set. So I think you can have a modular approach where you have your standardized control set. You can use your ISO 27001 for example, if you're using that framework, or NIST. And then you can ring fence the extra or the more prescriptive controls against systems or in different jurisdictions and manage it that way. It sounds complicated. It is, but I think if you approach it this way, in terms of having standard sets of controls and then making sure that applicable controls are in place, analysed, risk assessed, where it's required, then I think it starts to become more manageable. You can monitor it, and of course audit against it on as is required by the various frameworks.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. I think it's very good to try keeping this type of format, meaning setting the general view and then moving on the specificities of, for example, DORA combined with NIS2, and then concluding with the IT part. So this brings me back to Bartosz. We said at the beginning that we would have been addressing this case scenario starting from the scope and compliance complexity, which is what we have just done, which brings me to the second point we wanted to discuss today, which is the one of incident reporting and response. So my next question for Bartosz is, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the company, and we have a cross-border incident in a case like this one. How should the company manage communication and compliance with several and multiple authorities, in particular under NIS2. And we know that there is an additional layer of complexity because there might be other authorities involved due to other frameworks. So, can you share how would you approach these, Bartosz?
I think the best approach is to have a good preparation in advance. So to really check which company or which authority has the right or is responsible in cases of cyber incidents, and also in cases of GDPR, AI, and DORA. All those frameworks have different authorities that are responsible for certain incidents, and I think preparation is the key issue. So not wait until an incident has happened and then kind of act in panic, but really do it in advance, because this can save you quite a lot of efforts afterwards and hassle afterwards. So I think that the key issue is here right now, because of that, I would say quite difficult or quite complex framework, is a good preparation. Sorry.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Sorry, I was muted. Classic. I think one of the key elements, Bartosz, on what you were saying is not just the one of having an already made plan, but also to test it, to try it. Meaning that one of the issues we have been also facing is that sometimes there are companies that have a good plan structured but never really tried it. So when something happens, then they don't know how to implement it really. So also in this, I would like to add the element of preparedness or training to make sure that what you have within your company is important as well.
And also what is, I would say also what's really a key issue, look up the people that are responsible within the authority. Try to contact them in advance and try to be proactive. Just say it like this: be proactive. Test your own compliance within your company by contacting the responsible people, by, as you said rightly, Alessandro, by testing your system, whether it applies, whether it's workable, whether it's effective.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And let me bring the discussion towards DORA again. So, Michaela, we have been speaking about indeed incident reporting. How does it work for ICT service providers in the financial sector, so financial entities under DORA? When do they have to notify, and how to do that?
Yeah, this is actually one of my favorite topics, because as I said before, DORA actually affects mainly the financial subjects or sector, and then there are the ICT service providers that are somehow indirectly impacted. And this is kind of the obligation which is not mentioned within the list of contractual clauses. The only obligation that really arises from there is that the ICT service provider is obliged to actually provide the necessary help in case there is an incident, and it can be for free, or it can be actually paid. But as we today, I'm here for lawyers, otherwise can say the years in the cybersecurity field, and this is kind of the part of our work, is that we should see something what is behind the corner, or it can come in the worst case scenario. And of course, as there are more stricter rules on engagement and informing the national, authority about some kind of cyber incident that will happen or then will occur in the financial sector, of course, the financial entity needs to know about this incident and have to know all the information. And on one hand, this incident can occur in the in the perimeter or in the environment which is really controlled by the bank, but it can also occur in the environment. For example, here, as we have this example here, that actually the services are provided through the big cloud computing vendors, then definitely the most significant part of the contractual part is to set very precisely the obligation when and how to inform about occurring cybersecurity incident. So it's not just about informing the financial entity, but from the lawyer perspective, it can be also about some kind of ban on informing everyone else from the side of the ICT service provider, because it could kind of cause some kind of harm to the financial entity. So it's not just about to fit into this like inform about a cyber incident within 4 hours, but also to think about this like more out of the box and cover all these topics that are related.
Thank you, Michaela.
Yeah,
that's very useful. And we hear now NIS. We know that NIS2 requires incident reporting within 24 hours. Then we have now DORA that adds obligation to notify financial entities, and then we know that CRA does the same, as well as GDPR with its own timeline. So as we are still on the legal side, probably this time I would go back to Bartosz now. How should we balance all those overlapping reporting requirements? Because that's a big issue for many companies.
Do you hear me? Yes. Well, I would just say, I mean, you have to implement some kind of a step plan to just see how to start or how to deal with such an incident. But as the time limit is so short, it might be wise to have some kind of electronic or technical way to deal with that. So to implement a sort kind of software application that in case of incident, you have all the information. You've got all the information collected, and you can say to the right authority. So you have to implement, I would just say, due to those short time periods, you have to implement a technical based system. You cannot just rely on cooperation within your company. So I would say this is a key factor. And the other thing is, well, you have to practice that. You have to do that, just as you said before, Alessandro. You have to try it out whether it works within those 24 hours. 24 hours is a very short time period. So you have to really try to and the most important thing is, or the difficult thing I would also say is, if you have a cross-border incident, like we have it here in that example of Eurofin, I mean, you have to look up which are the right authorities. So this whole thing makes it quite difficult, especially when you consider that some of the national authorities might have different, due to that fact that it is a directive, the NIS2, might have different obligations to report. So those slightly different obligations can make a big issue for a company.
Of course. And before I move on the technical and IT side of it, Michaela, do you have any additional comments that you would like to add here?
Yeah, thank you, Ale. There is one thing that I would really love to emphasize, and it also kind of fits between Bartosz and Charlotte, because I experienced already, or I'd say a lot of cases when like the cybersecurity incident process was tested quite precisely in the focus, like according to the ISO 27001 or some another ISMS system. But what is really crucial in the view of the NIS2 and DORA, CRA, and all of that, it's very important not to forget about the lawyers, because at the end, I would say so far till all of these cybersecurity regulation, the cyber incidents were usually seen as something really technical. So when there was an incident, all the technical guys came and solved it, so the users can continue whatever they are doing. But now it's connected to the really important legal obligations. And usually, so it's important to, even if your company already has developed a comprehensive cybersecurity incident response plan, it's very crucial to review it and decide, are the lawyers there? And do I need only lawyers from my country? Or as Bartosz said, it's a very, very great point. Do I have to have ensure the cooperation of the lawyers from Czechia, Italy, France, and yeah, so because other jurisdictions are impacted, and this is highly relevant across all, I would say, all the regulations that we mentioned.
Thank you, Michaela, because this brings me back to another key point. That is the one of a centralized incident response, and this is something that I would like definitely to address to Charlotte, because we know that CSS Assures is quite used to deal with different expertise, so legal, cyber, and staying in the middle. I mean, how do you avoid having operational bottlenecks when you have to deal with, in particular, multi-jurisdictional scenarios like the one we are facing now?
I think we've touched on some of this, but you really need a dedicated incident response team that are trained with the appropriate personnel, so the appropriate legal teams to handle across jurisdictional incidents, cybersecurity and IT representatives, and absolutely crisis comms and PR support, as well as the execs, so the people from an operational level and an executive level who are also trained in what they're required to do in terms of decision making and communications if an incident were to happen. We've talked about the incident response plan. That absolutely needs to be geared for the multi-jurisdictional requirements. And also, we need to understand what needs to be reported. We've talked about the different requirements of when, but what are the systems capable of providing the data that is required to report to the various regulators? So again, it starts to become quite complex. Operations do need to go on while an incident is happening. So you need to take into consideration that this could be a 24-hour requirement. You know, not all cybersecurity incidents, unfortunately, happen in business hours. You need to be geared up to have a 24/7 response. And also you need to think about your suppliers. Michaela discussed this. They need to be contractually obligated to support you in an incident with SLAs that will allow you to get the information that you need based on the regulation that you're coming under.
Yeah, and you, in your experience, do you also, as I suspect, need technological infrastructure to do that? I mean, you need to be really timely in identify or detect an incident and then to report. So, you know, how do you, what do you need in order to make sure to respect these type of deadlines and time requirements, like one of 24 hours, which is, you know, very short?
Yes, and we need to consider some of the requirements. For example, NIS2 is prescribing that real-time monitoring and detection is required on critical systems. And so that's a step further than, yes, absolutely, we've seen that you should have monitoring solutions, but real-time detection actually having to be enforced is a consideration. And also log retention. NIS2 is saying you need to retain logs for 12 months. I believe DORA is prescribing potentially that it could be longer for financial transactions. So your systems need to be geared up to meet those requirements. And then further, I think realistically, to meet these requirements for 24-hour reporting, you're going to need a technical solution that's probably AI powered, can not only detect an incident, but also categorize it for you and create automated incident reports. you won't have time to bring in a third-party forensic team, I don't think, and get the information that you need. You need a security operations team, either internally or outsourced, that's able to get the information that they need pretty much instantly to start one, managing the incident, but also reporting the information to the incident response team that's having to then manage this reporting requirement. So that detection system needs to be at a system level, an endpoint level, a cloud level, and it needs to be centralized reporting, of course. Ideally, it would be able to be tailored to the reporting and requirements of the frameworks we're discussing.
Perfect. And we are back to the same point, which is let's start in structuring your plans since the very beginning in the right way, with everything that you need implemented, because the more you move on with the requirements of those regulations, the more it becomes complex, and there are additional layer of complexity, so that dealing immediately with the right expert from the right countries, from the right sector, helps you avoiding to then rework on things that were already done, or making sure that you have everything in place that you really need in order to be timely responsive and active when needed. Which brings me to the last part of our discussion today, which is the one of involving third parties. So let's go back to the old supply chain. That is one of the key problems whenever we deal with, in particular, NIS2, but also DORA. We were speaking a lot about this also during our previous session, how to specifically under the contractual perspective manage the clauses in order to make sure that you are covered, but also the companies you're working with are covered. And this brings me back to the legal side. So I would like to address the next one to Bartosz in this case. So when we speak about contracts with vendors under NIS2, we know that there are some vendors that are pretty small, so it's not always easy to ensure that they meet the cybersecurity standards through those many frameworks, not just NIS2. So how can we make sure that they comply without overburdening them?
Well, I think the first, when we look at those vendors that we have, for instance, Amazon or Google, those are big ones, and I think they're quite well prepared to any incident. And I think your negotiation scope is quite limited in such contracts, doing business with those big entities. But when you look at smaller vendors, small cloud providers or small platforms, I think what is a key issue would be an obligation to inform you as soon as possible if such incidents occur, so that you are also prepared and you know what's going on, that you can by yourself can take some actions. On the other hand, you can also put some obligations that they have to still comply with those NIS2 obligation, or DORA obligation, or GDPR. The situation what we are facing right now is kind of similar to the situation we faced before the introduction of the GDPR. Everybody was talking about it. Everybody was saying, "Oh my gosh, it's coming!" I think it was April 2000, in May, I think it. And I remember before that, everybody was talking about GDPR, and then it came, and then it kind of goes on. So I think the market will show how those contracts will evolve. But at this moment, I would say the key issue is good information. So you must be informed on a very fast and sufficient way. Second thing is maybe obligations that the vendor complies with these regulations and directives. And the third one, it could be to put some guarantees in the of indemnification provisions in the contract, which could kind of limit your liability, or put the liability to the vendor. if it's possible, if you're in the negotiation position, because this all depends, of course, whether you're able to negotiate such contracts in such a manner.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for this, and thanks a lot for summarizing at the end, the key steps and provisions in this regard. Michaela, how does DORA impact the contractual obligation we are also seeing and discussing with Bartosz right now for ICT third-party providers in the financial sector then?
Yeah, I would say there are definitely similarities. Of course, I would say it's nothing new, but on the other hand, let us make a little bit, again, like one step back, because what is super important, and DORA is like emphasizing this activity, is to really have in place the proper risk management when we are in the phase of like choosing the right supplier. And this is the step, I believe, that can help us or can help the financial entity to really provide the I don't know why there is this kind of icon, probably something automatic, but anyway, it's like that. This is the step which really helps to provide the right, let's say, right set of the contractual measures to the specific contractor, because as it was said, we have a special type of services which is really like providing a cloud solution that for the core banking system or something like that, and the risk associated with this are definitely different than the risks that are associated with someone. I need someone like the physical person who will work from like, let's say, company computer, but this person for some reason doesn't want to be employed formally. There will be the contract. So there are different set of measures that should be imposed. What is a little bit different in DORA is that DORA really sets, like, let's say, the minimum standard that should always be in the contract with the ICT service providers. I would say, at least in Czech implementation of NIS2, we are provided with a list of examples, what kind of topics can be then passed to the supply chain. But with DORA, it's like, hey, this is the minimum requirements for the ICT service in the, let's say, lower regime, and then the ICT service providers that are providing the function, which is like important. And this can be kind of like tricky, because we always have to have this in mind. So there's also some kind of opportunity to adjust these measures or these requirements, but actually there is the list, all of them that should be in the contract.
I see. And are there other similar impacts from the other frameworks we mentioned, like CRA or other, that you would be considering or mentioning in a case like this?
Yeah. This is actually, again, I would say kind of similar, but what I would like to point out with the CRA, which I personally find is very interesting, is the requirement to provide kind of like software bill of materials. And I think that this goes a little DORA or NIS2, because that it really provides the comprehensive overchain. And it's not like DORA also has some regulations on that, the whole supply chain will be reported to the authority, but CRA actually says it will be provided to the person that is sourcing the activity. So there can be like kind of direct, I don't want to say probably control, but at least the overview, what kind of materials, even hardware, software, it's mainly about software, is included in the solution. So there is definitely more transparency in that. It's not really like the contractual obligation, of course, but it will be more definitely in the contractual obligations. And it's something what I consider at least a very interesting part of how actually usual framework around security is maturing to the building resilience, digital resilience.
Perfect. And I believe that this also sets the basis for another point, which is the capability of the companies to control, the third-party security frameworks. So this brings me back to Charlotte. So what are the practical steps in your view that a company like Eurofintech, so our simulated company here, should take to gain better visibility into third-party security frameworks, but also to ensure that there is an ongoing compliance with those many frameworks that we are mentioning?
So I agree with Michaela. There needs to be a really robust third-party due diligence process, and that's going to be looking at mapping your vendors, looking at the impact they have on you. So are they carrying data? Do they have access? Would they impact your operations if something was to happen to them? Your reputation. So a risk assessment. As you would in a normal due diligence process, but now you have to consider what are the requirements of those third parties for you to remain compliant, of course. So you're looking at things like if it is a smaller organization, being able to perform security audits on them. You need to understand that they're doing things like pen testing, that they're encrypting to the correct standard if they're storing data on your behalf or processing data, that they've got multi-factor authentication in place, privileged access controls. Now, for obviously these larger vendors, you're not going to get you're not going to be able to perform an audit on them at the level that you would want to. And so there we're looking for certifications and statements from them that demonstrate that they have these controls in place, and therefore, because at the end of the day, you as an organization still have to govern your third parties and are responsible for how they're managing obviously solutions on your behalf. So that's a step you can take, and in a due diligence process, that's often how it would work. Normally, if you can't get access to do an audit, you're looking for certifications that kind of take them to that next step where you go, okay, this sort of de-risks the situation for us, and we're content with that they're performing or have controls in place that are appropriate. And again, that can be also managed and enforced in contracts, specifics of security controls that are required from NIS2, for example.
Perfect. And Michaela, to come back to the various frameworks, DORA, but also others, is there any requirement related to qualification or expertise that compliance teams needs to have when handling incident response?
Yeah. I have to admit, I'm not like generally on the EU level, I'm not aware of any such requirements. On the other hand, what we know that DORA wants, the ICT service providers, again, to act in a manner that is aligned with the newest industrial security best practice. So there is some kind of, way of leading how it should be. On the other hand, as I'm here from Czech law firm, we have very diligent national authority, cybersecurity authority, and actually we were provided with some kind of recommendations. What should be the qualification of the manager of information security, like CISO? What should be the grade profile for the auditor or a security architect? So we are a little bit more detailed here, but I would say it's more like a Czech specific. On the other hand, we can definitely approach this topic from the perspective of management of the company, because management has a certain responsibilities to act in the best manner for the company. And of course, they're interested to have the best people or the best capable people that will then handle the cybersecurity incidents, that will do the, all the things that are connected to that. And this is kind of what is big topic, I believe now across all Europe, but in Czech Republic, it really resonates, is are there enough sources regarding human resources that will cover all the security roles? Because it started with the GDPR, it continues with the NIS2, then we have some AI Act officer and so on and so on. And of course, there won't be so many security engaged people. So what I usually try to emphasize when I'm speaking about this matter with my clients is to like have a look inside of your company. Maybe there is some kind of lawyer which is already like want to switch a little bit the focus. And I personally believe that the lawyers can be great CISOs, because big part of this work is really to ensure the compliance part, which is have like connected with all the like papers, risk management, analysis, reporting, and all of that. And in case there is a good interplay with the technical guys, it can work very well. And on the other hand, there can be also like burnout IT security guy or IT guy who would like to engage more with the security, and then it's more like to to take some education, maybe some course, some training to actually find the talent within. So I believe this can be one of the practical steps how to ensure all the proper capacities for all the subjects that will need it in the future.
Sure. Charlotte, do you agree with that? I was hearing about the lawyers being CISOs, so I don't know if you have any experience in this regard.
I think I agree. I think we're starting to see these roles become very multidisciplinary. So of course you need a technical understanding. You need to understand what a pen test is, for example, if you're a lawyer, but a technically astute lawyer being a CISO, because I think the compliance and governance requirements are becoming that complex. I think it works. Or potentially you split this into two roles now, and one is technical and one is legal, and they work together, because I think we're seeing now this is not purely a technical problem anymore. It's not the IT team's problem. This is a governance problem, or something that we need to manage into the future. So I think these roles are evolving, and we need to get ahead of that.
Perfect. Awesome, Charlotte. And we are running out of our time, but if you allow me, I would like to dedicate a few minutes, because we are receiving some questions. So I would like to share those with you. And first one is related to, they are mainly related to dealing with many different framework, in particular NIS2, CRA, and DORA. And the first one is there a simple approach to avoid duplicated risk assessment between NIS2, CRA, and DORA? I don't know if Charlotte wants to start with it, and then anyone else would like to align or add something to that.
I think it goes back to creating a framework where you can maximize efficiencies in assessing controls, but making sure you're covering the delta of where there are further requirements at a jurisdictional regulatory level. So you're not auditing one and auditing another, then auditing another. I think you need to map them. Is the best approach.
But first, you need to know which framework you have to comply with. So you need to make sure on which one you are.
Well, yes, that's a very good start. I think it's in the scope that we discussed.
Yeah. Any other tip from Bartosz or Michael on this?
Well, I would just say that first of all, you have to see whether one of those instruments applies in your case. This is the first step, and then and I would just say that the problem of all those measures the instruments that were introduced right now is that on one hand they're very they try to harmonize, of course, the situation within Europe. On the other hand, they make it in slight different approaches, which makes for companies, and as I said in the beginning, for especially the smaller ones, the startups, they don't want to be busy with all those regulations. They want to do let me be clear, fintech companies, those are guys in the IT. They want to make a nice product. They want to put all their energy into their work, and not being kind of limited by some European regulations at the end of the day, even as those regulations have a good purpose. So I think that there can be two ways. Either you try to do it internally, or you get advisors from those jurisdictions that you are deal with, that make for you that that legal framework, the compliance, the whole thing, which costs of course a little bit, but takes away all those painful actions that you have to do then internally. And this of course depends on the size of the company.
Yeah. Let us avoid headache with all those requirements and compliance needs. There is another question that I think goes a bit more back to Charlotte, which is: are there common technical controls that satisfy all the three frameworks? Speaking about DORA, CRA, and NIS2.
I think I've
yeah,
touched
it's
on
very
it,
close. So yeah,
somewhat. I think a framework like ISO 27001, absolutely at a technical control level, is going to cover I don't want to throw a percentage out, we'll say a high percentage of the controls that exist in all of the frameworks, but you're going to get into some specifics about what needs to be applied and where and to what standard. And that's something new that's emerging, because a framework like ISO 27001 and NIST talks about a control. It doesn't tell you at what standard to what level that you need to implement them and on what. And so I think that's the key, is having something that covers your high percentage, and then making sure that you're getting into the detail of what the legal requirements are on the appropriate systems that have been classified at a certain level, because that's the detail we're getting into now. NIS2, you have to do a risk assessment to determine the criticality of a system, and then you apply a very specific set of controls to that system. But you might be a good way down the road, having implemented a framework previously, and so you can just be doing gap analysis then to say what are we missing, and then implement the appropriate measures.
Yeah. So it can be a really good starting point to be already compliant with certain standards.
It's a good starting point.
Is definitely useful. I have just one last question that was shared, which is very very broad actually, and touch upon the discussion of today. So might be a good way to go into the key takeaways to conclude this session. So the question was, what are the key factors companies should consider when navigating the differences in legal and technical requirements between NIS2, CRA, and DORA to ensure a comprehensive compliance, which I believe is really about summarizing the discussion of today. So maybe we can just have a final round with the three of you. Maybe I can start with Michaela this time, and then Charlotte and Bartosz.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I would say that the first really key part is to really know your responsibilities, because, and it just arises from my latest experience, a lot of clients have comprehensive gap analysis of the technical and organizational measures, but then they are like, yeah, but what kind of regulated service we do provide? And will CRA will be also applicable? And what about DORA? DORA does not affect us, because we are just IT providers. So, and it was already mentioned, I would say I'm more like repeating what was mentioned during this session, maybe also the session before. I would say the first step is really to know what I have to deal with. And this is something what can then help me develop all the other things or steps. So it can help me assess, do I need an external company to help me, or do I have enough internal resources? It will help me to actually think about the risk analysis, because opposite to what was already said, I would say my opinion is kind of different, because I believe that risk analysis is just simply what I have in mind, but I just have to put it on the paper. Usually the risk analysis is just like common thinking, but somehow transferred to the numbers. And it's very important, again, to really know the sense, or know the sense on what kind of maturity I need to take, which technical measures I really have to implement to be super compliant. I don't know, number 5, and which kind of technical measures can be implemented on the level of 2, because I have already different measures that are like hand in hand covering this kind of topics.
Yep.
So not to really prolong this, it's about to really take time at the beginning to develop the strategic approach, step by step, plan the activities, actually also allocate the resources, not just financial resources, but also human resources in a way. Do I need hire more people? Do I need to engage external company? Do I need more like technical company or someone who will provide me external SOC, or I just need lawyers? Do I need them only for assessment, or do I want to engage them something like a service? So in case there will be cybersecurity incident, the real one, I will have already the lawyers in place and they will help me to really satisfy all the regulatory needs. So yeah, I would say keep structured and don't be afraid.
Yeah. And that was also something coming from the previous session, involve the different type of expertise as soon as you can, because each of them might have an idea or foresee an issue that you don't see, or your team or your IT team or vice versa, your legal team don't see. So having as in this panel, a conversation between experts with different type of backgrounds can really help in forecasting, preventing, and avoiding the issues then to come at a later stage. Bart or Charlotte, anything from your side?
I would say Charlotte. I have the last word.
Okay, I'll jump in. Okay, I'll let you have it. I agree with a lot of what Michaela said. Having a legal and a technical assessment, so you have the understanding is very powerful. So being able to create a roadmap, understand where you need to appropriate resources and budget, and understand the task at hand. To basically, you might have timeframes, you might have auditors that need to be booked in. So basically, do your understanding piece, do your assessment, make your roadmap, and understand what your key timeframes are as well that you have to meet, and then you can work from there. I think that makes it more manageable.
Bartosz.
Yes, I totally agree with both of the previous speakers. I would just say, don't be scared, is what Michaela says very well. And look, you have to make some strategic, thinking in advance. What countries are affected? Does it affect me in the first place? And then, just as Michaela said, do you want to have an in-house team of an external team? Do you want to maybe combine that? But I think what's the key issue is to take a proactive approach. So don't wait until it comes. Act in advance. Be sure that you will not just face the consequences of not acting, but that you are dealing with it in advance. So I would just take this from this session.
Thank you very much to you all. Michaela, I see you are raising the
yeah, kind of, because I believe at the end of the session, it reminds me actually one of the joke. My children came through school like last week, and they were like, "Hey, Mom, do you know how to eat an elephant?" It's like, okay, no, even though I'm a lawyer, piece by piece. So it's kind of like, very similar to this. We have all the frameworks approaching. Actually, what we didn't mention today is the directive on critical entities. This also requires, again, risk assessments, different kind of measures. It's more connected to the physical security and everything. So I would like say everything what we mentioned today. It's like not be afraid, plan, and eat it piece by piece.
And brings me to the conclusion by saying that since we are speaking about NIS2, we know that the implementation phase is different country by country, but it's already a good time to start looking at it, even if in your own country is not yet implemented, because as you can see, there are a lot of things to consider and to look at. I'd like to thank you all for being with us. Also, our audience. We are 15 minutes away, but it was just for a good reason, because we had very good questions and topics to discuss today. So thanks a lot, and looking forward to the next webinar together and activity within the privacy rules framework, or to work together on NIS2 within the privacy rules team. If you need anything, contact us anytime. And bye, everyone.
Thank you, Alexandro. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.